Hey Midpointers, my name is David Gonzales and I'm here today to talk to you about what it is to be a real friend. Now in August of 2020, I was diagnosed with an incurable cancer called multiple myeloma. And there have been times where I've been in and out of the hospital, but I'm remembering this one instant where I was in the hospital for a really long time. I felt hopeless. I felt like life was slipping away from me and wasn't quite sure how to handle it or what to do. But a friend of mine, actually a good friend of mine, one of my best friends, came into the hospital that day and began to talk with me. And before it was over, I think he realized the kind of state and my mind frame and how I was feeling, just defeated and needed encouragement. He asked me this question. He said, "Dave, do you have just a little bit more fight left in you?" And after thinking about it, I thought, you know what, I do. I'm not ready to die. I'm not ready to go home to see Jesus yet. I think I still have things that I need to do. And so when he presented that question, it changed me, it encouraged me, and I knew I had something to fight for. Well, believe it or not, within the next couple of weeks and months as I was recovering, God healed me of the cancer that was incurable. And right now, I don't have anything in my body that even says remotely that I've ever had cancer. So I just want to give God some thanks for that. Now, today's lesson, I told you in the beginning, is going to talk about real friendship. And I think we all need friends like my friend Patrick was to me. In fact, we're going to learn a story today that's going to be in our scripture reading that's going to come from John chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. Let me ask you something. Have you learned the importance of being a real friend for someone who needs it in time of need? Well, because of that instance, I've learned that I need to be available to the people that I care about. Why? Because that's what a real friend does. Now, picking up our story, let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about what it'd be like if God is so easily able to comfort others? Could God grieve? Is that even possible? Well, let me share this story with you about Jesus and how he interacted with some of his friends. The story goes like this. Jesus was going all over the place healing people. He was ministering, he was teaching, and he had gotten word from his friends that in Judea, one of his good friends, Lazarus, was sick. In fact, he was so sick, he was on death's door. But Jesus told them, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. I'll come back in a couple of days and fellowship with you." Well, a couple of days had passed, and unfortunately, Lazarus, because of his illness, had passed away. He had died. Well, Jesus had gotten wind, and so him and his disciples were heading back to Judea. Why? Because he still wanted to see his friend. Even though time had passed and he had already passed away, he still wanted to be there for the family. So when Jesus got back to Judea, and let me give you this side note, it was really dangerous for Jesus to go back to go see Lazarus because he was almost stoned. They almost stoned him out of the city. But guess what? That's what a real friend does. They show up in a time of need. And when he gets there, Lazarus' sister had told Jesus, "If you had only been here, he would have been healed." And Jesus' reply was, "Don't worry, God is going to receive glory this day." And so what happens? Jesus wept with them because he felt that loss. He felt the grief. He saw everybody around him was just really sad for the passing of their friend, Lazarus. But when Jesus got to the place, he told them, "Roll that stone away." And with a loud voice, he said, "Lazarus, come forth." And believe it or not, in that moment, Lazarus came out of the grave and began to fellowship with his friends. Now, what a sight that must have been, right? Because back in the day, they wrapped you fully with linens and cloths, so you probably looked like a mummy coming out of that thing, and it must have been a sight for everyone to see. But we know that God can do anything, and so in that moment, Jesus had showed up. You may be saying, well, how did he comfort people? Well, I'm going to give you 3 ways that he was able to do that. Number 1, he used his words. What do I mean? At that moment, when Jesus had gotten back to Judea, he began to pray with and pray for. But he also reminded them that with God, nothing is impossible. He also prayed with them and for them. How else did Jesus comfort them? Well, he did it with number 2. He did it with his presence. He showed up. He was there when it mattered. Jesus was right there amongst his friends. He always made time to be that real friend. And thirdly, how did he comfort people? He did it with his actions. Now, we all know Jesus could have instantly, at any point, healed Lazarus and even raised him from the dead from where he was at. But Jesus showed up, and the Bible tells us that even though he could have raised him back from the dead, he still mourned and he still empathized with his friends and even his closest friends. Why? Because that's what real friends do. And in fact, you may need comfort. You may have a friend that needs comforting. Can you be that friend? Can you be that real friend? In fact, I want to tell you one more story to really solidify and bring this home for you so that you understand. In the Old Testament, and when I say Old Testament, we know that the Bible is divided into 2 parts. There's the New Testament, which is after Jesus was born, and then there's the Old Testament, which comes before Jesus was born. And in the book of Jeremiah, we find out that there was a prophet named Jeremiah, and the Bible calls him the weeping prophet. Well, why does he call him the weeping prophet? I'm glad you asked. Well, he was called the weeping prophet because he was always carrying the burdens of the people of Israel. What do I mean by that? Well, the people of Israel at this time were doing so much wrong in front of God and in front of the whole nation that it broke Jeremiah's heart. He would actually grieve over the sins of his people. And the sins was so great, and the consequence of that sin was so great that God was going to destroy the city just because they were living however they wanted to live. And Jeremiah would carry that burden with him. But he also knew who to go to when he was hurting, when he was in despair. In fact, in Jeremiah chapter 8, verses 18 through 19, let's see what he says. This is who he says. You are my comforter in sorrow. Who's his comforter? At this point, he's saying, God is my comforter. Jeremiah was grieving. He was afraid. He was helpless. But he cried out to God. Why? Because he trusted that God would be able to comfort him in this moment. Now, maybe you know somebody that needs comforting, that needs care, that just needs a friend. Are you able to be that person? Listen, I would say let's take the example of Jesus and the example of Jeremiah. Let's be like Jesus in regard to being there, using our words, making our presence known, and like Jeremiah, praying for the people, grieving over those that are grieving, rejoicing with those that are rejoicing. Why? Why do you say that's so important, Dave? Let me tell you, because these examples show what it's like to be a true friend.